Good afternoon. I'm Lori Sundberg. I'm the president of Kirkwood Community College. I would like to welcome you to the Iowa Ideas Conference. The Iowa Ideas Conference is in its fourth year, and it's an important opportunity to gather Iowans around a common experience. Really, now more than ever, we commit to providing opportunities for every Iowan to be part of this experience. 2020 is a year that none of us could have predicted. Yet in true Iowa Ideas fashion, we see this year as an opportunity to raise up the issues that will bring us a stronger tomorrow. Kirkwood is honored to support the Iowa Ideas Conference. It's a great example of partnering with others in our community to bring a terrific conference to our state and to Iowans. Enjoy the conference.
Right now, it was released as of the 14th of October, of the campuses across the country, and this is about 3,000 responding, 10% are still fully online. 34% say they're primarily online, and 23% say they're primarily in person. Only 4% are fully in person, and 21% say they're hybrid. And I would guess that on Jonathan and Kevin's campuses, there's a lot of hybrid activity going on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so for us, 90% of our courses can be taken online right now. And of those 90%, 77% are in person and online. So
right.
Exactly right, Sally, from our perspective.
Yeah, and Provost Kregel, it seems like some of those percentages have been a little fluid. Am I right on that? That the numbers shift based on student and faculty preferences?
Yeah, you're right, Vanessa. And for us, that was one of the driving factors at the beginning of the fall semester. You might recall also we had quite a surge right that weekend before classes even started. And it was primarily in our undergraduate student population. So over the course of the next couple of weeks, we did have to have flexibility and shift some courses temporarily or for the whole semester to an online or a hybrid format. So that was part of the benefit of having this planning and contingency. We had our instructors ready to be able to transition. Students were prepared as well. So it was a pretty seamless transition when we did have to make those pivots.
You know, another factor in this, Vanessa, has been the county health departments. So here in your old hometown of Boulder, the University of Colorado brought the students back in late August. By mid-September, huge spikes in cases to the extent that the public health folks were getting a little worried. And they said, look, we're saying, and the county then, and the city passed ordinances that said 18 to 22-year-olds couldn't gather in groups, period. Didn't last real long, but you know, it was at least for 2 weeks, and that's just been lifted. And the cases still climb, but not as precipitously as they did at the beginning.
Yeah, I remember reading that and finding it so interesting. I'm wondering if you guys can talk about what the major differences in the higher education experience this fall compared to a traditional fall. Like what are students experiencing now that looks most dramatically different than what they would have been?
Wow. I mean, interestingly and shockingly, maybe, I think the classroom experience is much more similar to last year than they expected. I mean, 85% of our students are on campus and they're in their classes. They are 6 feet apart, at least in every classroom. I think the part that has been harder for them, for all of us, frankly, it's all the requirements, the rules, the protocols we have in place outside of the classroom. Circulation around campus is very different. Obviously, wearing a face covering, a mask, maintaining physical distancing. They go into the dining hall in cohorts, and they're basically limited to about 30 minutes of dining at a time because we need to move the next group through. the residential life experiences, of course, our students are if you don't live in a particular residence hall, you're not allowed in that in that residence hall, and that's so I think that the social residential part of college has been, for us at least, completely redefined. I will say, as one digression, when I asked a student, I said, "I'm really sorry." She said, "President Brand, as compared to being in my parents' basement for the last 5 months, I'll take anything I can get here."
Yeah, I don't blame her.
Well, I'll just add, at the University of Iowa, we had a survey conducted of students in the spring semester. And one thing they noted that, was important was to have really meaningful interaction with faculty, no matter what the modality. So in person, Zoom, phone, email, they just wanted to stay connected somehow. And so we really have been striving to make sure that they have that contact. To Jonathan's point, it is very different. And to maintain some semblance of interaction, on a personal basis, is really a key right now. And that certainly is a challenge for us, but that's really a goal here.
You know, and moving up to a sort of broad level of this, 16% of people who would have been first-time freshmen didn't come to their campus. So
Wow.
New enrollments are way down, but by different sectors. And I know there were stories out based on some of this data yesterday and today that community colleges have been hit the hardest in terms of enrollment declines, which is counter to the usual things that happen when there's a disruption economically in the culture. But the other thing that's also rather interesting is 13% of the students enrolled at four-year institutions have said that they're going to have to push back their graduation.
Mm.
So there's folks are giving up or postponing anyway.
Yeah. Do you feel like freshmen are the hardest hit cohort here? Because I feel like it may be easier for a sophomore to return or a junior or senior because they've done it before and they understand they have friends and connections. I mean, is it the freshmen that are either having the hardest time or making the decision to not start more often?
It seems to be the case, at least in the national surveys. And I don't know, Jonathan and Kevin, what you're finding.
I think it depends on what you're measuring. If it's all about degree completion or attainment of a degree, I think students who haven't started college yet are a population that's probably harmed the most because they don't even know what they're missing. But if you look at the quality of the experience, I mean, I feel really terribly for our seniors, terrible for them, because their senior year, that sort of that culminating celebratory year has been completely altered for them.
Right.
Yeah, and I think another important point, the first year students are, I think, in general, more vulnerable. And if you think about the fact that most, if not all, were from early mid-March, not in class as seniors in high school or doing something on a limited basis virtually. So they came onto campuses probably less prepared than they normally would be. So that's been a challenge, I'm sure, for a lot of these students as well.
Yeah.
And Vanessa, I worry. Obviously, we have to do what we have to do to combat and minimize transmission and to deal with COVID-19. I worry that a decade from now, we're going to have a population of students, graduates, hopefully by that point, who are really going to be mad that college was stolen from them.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And obviously there are many things that people are just eager to have back and to do like they always have done. But I'm wondering, do you think that everything is just going to snap back into place, or what are we doing today that is going to be a lasting change, do you think? What do you think that this virus has forced us to do today that we'll just continue to do that we wouldn't have done before, you know? Or maybe everything will just go back to it exactly like it was.
I don't think anything's going to go back to being exactly like it was. Certainly the planning that both Kevin and Jonathan talked about, while those exercises are in place, again, as they both mentioned, they're usually a crisis event, and then the crisis passes. And we're looking at probably years of still having to maintain those crisis teams, of figuring out what's going on within the community and what kind of steps can be made, particularly to protect vulnerable populations that are on the campus. Cal State, which is the biggest public system in the country, has already said fully online in the spring. We're not going to play the game.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, do you guys have other thoughts about things that might be lasting?
Yeah, I definitely do. I don't know if you want to go first. Go ahead.
No, by all means, Jonathan.
I think there are a lot of things that are going to be different. I mean, first of all, I think that the acceptance of online learning, remote learning, is here to stay. That has been in higher ed traditionally, historically, a huge obstacle. I think we are over that hump, and not just over it, but I think faculty from spring to now have gained an expertise and a comfort level that is beyond even impressive. And I think that's only going to get better. And I frankly think our students and future students will expect that. I do think we all know we're living in this, that there's a demographic cliff coming in 5 years, with 15% of the high school graduate population is going to decline by about 15%. And I think that this will accelerate the financial challenges that schools are going to have, without a doubt. I think that the idea of offering credentialing certificates may increase as people pay more attention to the value proposition. I think that communication, one of the areas that I know we've all had to work more on, is communicating more and more and more with parents, students, prospective parents, faculty, staff, alumni, community members. I think it's been one of the great successes and one of the more satisfying parts of COVID-19 is enhancing those communications. I think that's going to have to continue into the future. What I wonder is, will this have any impact on student life in the future? Will the notions of a party culture at colleges, will that change in any permanent and enduring way?
I'll just add that my strong sense is that students still largely prefer a residential campus, but that doesn't mean they necessarily are going to prefer all face-to-face. To Jonathan's point, I think we will see a lot more online or hybrid types of courses, but a few potential silver linings here, or benefits as we roll out of this in the next 12, 24 months, is development of things like supplemental instruction for students, that it's going to be online. We've been rotating now to more virtual alumni engagement opportunities. So we're actually reaching many more people in these kinds of audiences because it's easier for them to do it via Zoom, for example. Our onboarding programs, like orientation programs now for new students and faculty for that matter, and employees is going to be much more enhanced, I think, through this kind of a process. Virtual campus tours that we're now offering, more pipeline programs, some special populations like first gens where we can reach them more, get them more onboarded through virtual training, I think, as they transition to campus. So I think we've developed some resources, tools that actually will benefit the higher education environment going forward.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
No. Go ahead. I'll add after you, Sally.
Well, I was going to pick up on something you mentioned, and that is, what's going on demographically in Iowa, particularly. As you may or may not be aware, WICHE, the Western Union State Commission for Higher Ed, does a national state-by-state projection, which is frequently where these things are coming from. And in December of this year, their newest Knocking at the College Door is coming out. And because they're upstairs when we're all in the office, they were nice enough to give me some information about Iowa. One of the things that we know in Iowa is your equity gap between non-whites and everybody else is not real great. It's higher, that is, the gap is higher than the national average. 15 years ago, in 2005, the percentage of graduates coming out of high school in Iowa was non-white, was about 10%. 15 years later, this year, the percentage of high school graduates that are non-white is 27%. And 2035, that is 15 years from now, so these people are already getting ready for school, the percentage of non-white grads is 37. So we've gone in 15-year chunks in Iowa from 10% of non-white young people coming out of high school to 27%, and 15 years from now, this isn't really a projection, it's the reality, it will be 37%. Now, the reason I think that's very important is these are people that have not been served well by the systems as they have been in place for a long time. So as Jonathan, you said, there's an acceleration of changes to higher education practices that are likely to keep going because they're going to need to, and the notion of the flexibility of the way in which a college is operating or a university to be able to serve the students that are available to come to the campus will also have to change.
Yeah, so fewer students and more diverse. Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
This is why these comments also make me wonder whether one longer term change that we might see in higher ed is the ultimate end of the sort of traditional academic calendar, right? The traditional agrarian calendar of starting in August or September and going until May or early June, that it might end up being more flexible over 12 months of the year.
It seems to be the kinds of things that the new population of students will be expecting, but also to serve the number of non-traditional age students in Iowa that will be important to consider for post-secondary ed when you look at underemployed and unemployed folks, again, that has been accelerated by the COVID pandemic.
Well, I guess one question that leaves me with is how can universities and colleges do better at getting first generation students or bring them to campus? Is it financial aid? I mean, do they need to bolster that? Is it the flexibility, as you mentioned, and what and how is like this pandemic right now going to affect their ability to do that well, to attract more first gen students?
There's, you know, Vanessa, if there were a simple answer to that, I think everybody would be doing it.
Yeah.
There isn't a simple answer because different populations have different sets of needs. Certainly it goes back into K-12 to assure that all students have the preparation they need to move into post-secondary ed because it's really needed. And there is a gap in Iowa between the number of jobs in 2020 that require a college education. And by that, I don't necessarily mean an associate or a baccalaureate degree. Sometimes it's a certification at a level that gets you into the workforce. But the gap in the number of jobs right now that require a college education and the number of adults in Iowa who have those is about 24%.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm wondering about the financial side of it. How have the universities been impacted financially, I guess, by this, and in what ways? Like obviously costs and with the state, you know, support and aid. And I guess like how can the universities and the colleges get out of that? I mean, what's kind of you mentioned budgeting models and stuff. I mean, what what are the techniques people are employing, and how are you looking at this from a student perspective?
You know, please, Jonathan, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sally.
Well, let me paint a big picture, and then perhaps each of you would want to respond in different ways. NCHEMS works, well, we work with campuses, but more often we work with states and state systems for the publics. And the question you just asked, Vanessa, is not one that can be solved institution by institution by institution. It's going to require a broader set of institutions to be able to work together, hence the use of a state model. And even in private colleges and universities, they're forming consortia and finding ways they can work together to share resources, because there's no question that our current model financially isn't sustainable.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think the future is in partnerships. The financial model for higher education is very challenging. It's now even more challenging in light of COVID-19 and, of course, this demographic shift that's coming in, which pushes every school to try to make a go of it alone. And that's not going to be the answer for most schools. I mean, for the Ivy Leagues, they'll be fine for years. But for the rest of the world, largely, it's about those partnerships. It's about strengthening the value proposition. It's about ensuring that our future students and families recognize that college always pays off. On average, students are better off with a college degree than not with a college degree.
Right. Provost Kregel, I just want to ask too, because this obviously the university's partnership that was really a big deal recently was not compelled by the coronavirus, of course. But wondering, do you think, like Jonathan Brand just said, that might be an impetus for more of this, or was it already heading that direction?
I think, Vanessa, it was already heading that direction, but this certainly is going to, I think, enhance different universities and colleges' approach to generating alternative methods of revenue. Certainly in the state of Iowa, the support for the public institutions has continued to decline. So there will have to be other approaches. And so I know you're referencing our public-private partnership with the utilities on our campus. So considering other options along those lines are certainly, I think, things that will need to be put on the table as we go forward, because there are going to be needs to support students, financial aid, for example, bring in faculty and staff that are more diverse to match up with that population as well. So there are so many moving pieces to this. It's complicated.
Right. Before I ask this question, I just want to make everybody aware who's listening that if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat, and I'll throw them out there too, because we'd love to hear folks' questions as well. But I'm wondering about, in terms of the enrollment cliff and one question I wanted to ask before we move on from partnerships is whether you are thinking, in addition to the public-private idea, that there will be more partnerships and collaborations, and maybe, Jonathan, this is what you were saying earlier, but between universities and campuses, or could there be, Provost Kregel, more collaboration in terms of even programs that are offered between the regent universities? What could that look like?
Well, actually, that process is being evaluated right now. There's a couple of subcommittees at the board level that are evaluating things like course sharing. So students, for example, at Iowa State could be taking a specific course that may not be offered there on the Ames campus at the University of Iowa or at Northern Iowa. So those are going to be somewhat, I think, opportunities for efficiencies, and then as well allow students in other parts of the state, say in Western Iowa, that may not have access to certain kinds of disciplinary coursework to engage in that. So I think that collaboration clearly is being discussed right now. I think the ability now that we've been talking about to offer more online courses will certainly enhance that. So I think we can perhaps eliminate some redundancies and have much more in terms of efficiency of offerings for students.
Yeah.
And,
Do you? Go ahead.
And Vanessa, we're experiencing something very similar. I mean, Cornell's a member of an association called the Associated Colleges of the Midwest, which pretty much includes, I choose to believe, the most sort of distinguished liberal arts colleges of the upper Midwest: Cornell, Grinnell, Coe, Luther, Carleton, Macalester, Beloit. And so we're actively developing, for example, we realize that there are many classes, particularly in the foreign languages, where we can offer them collectively in a virtual format in a way that individually really doesn't make sense for most of the schools. And I think, just as Kevin mentioned, I think that is great for our students, and I think that's great for our all of our institutions. That is definitely the future. And while this might not be quite the same in the same way, I mean, we have several partnerships with the University of Iowa. I mean, we try to encourage our students to graduate and to go into public health, to go into law. I mean, many of our students who go to graduate school go to the University of Iowa, and we love that.
We do too.
Right. Yeah, it seems that a robust higher education landscape is better for everybody. That nobody likes to see a university fold under these sort of conditions. Do you think that is, maybe this is a question for Sally, but do you think that is going to happen to some privates because of this pandemic?
Oh, it's already happening, and it's not just the pandemic, but again, as I think all of us have said, the pandemic has accelerated the trends that were already starting. New England is hit more intensely in terms of some of the privates either folding or being incorporated into other institutions. And that's a challenge, because that too is not something we're used to seeing happen. And the quality assurance community, the accreditors, as well as the federal and state folks, do ask that institutions have teach-out plans in place, and that's evaluated whenever they go through reaccreditation. Will the University of Iowa have problems? I don't think so. And I think it's unlikely that Cornell College would as well. But when you look at smaller institutions, this is very prevalent with faith-based institutions. They go away. And the people that would choose to go to those colleges more frequently will look at public comprehensives.
Okay. This is jumping a little bit, but I'm just curious. I know that the campuses have made so many physical changes in response to the pandemic. Do you think any of those things will be lasting? Or can you just talk about what changes you've made, and then say whether any of those changes, like plexiglass barriers in different buildings or whatever, will stick around or not?
I don't know, speaking for the University of Iowa campus, how that will play out, but that it was such a huge undertaking for us to equip all of our classrooms. We have about almost 350 classrooms that we had to equip out. We put cameras in each one of those classrooms for the opportunity for synchronous or asynchronous instruction. So I think that, again, is a positive, that we have the infrastructure now, the technology ready going forward to have flexibility in our course offerings. But to your point of plexiglass or spacing, hopefully we'll get to a point where we don't have to have the signage and the flows and things like that. It's certainly not going to be next spring, likely not even next fall. Hopefully we're a little closer to normal by then, but I see a lot of things reverting back to, in terms of the structural components of the campus. But I think the other side of it is, at least for us, a lot of folks are working virtual, our employees, and a lot of those will likely remain virtual. That's a big trend in higher education and in the corporate sector as well. And I think we'll see that for sure.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I wonder, Vanessa, I completely agree. I do wonder some of it, of course, is subject to a vaccine, a legitimate vaccine that works. I wonder how long into the future we'll be testing students. I mean, we have a pretty well-developed randomized and stratified testing plan, and I feel like that could be going on for years.
Right. I mean, have you felt like some of those physical changes, the flows and the signage and everything, the distancing has been pretty effective though?
Definitely. But it's not, yeah, definitely, but it's not our dream scenario.
Right.
To even just the process of taking a class size, a class roster, knowing how many are on campus, measuring out every classroom to make sure that every student has 42 square feet around them. It's the overhead, it's so burdensome to go through that process. And I would love for us to be able to minimize all of the work it takes to scheduling classes. And I think our students would prefer it too. By the same token, I will say we have these outdoor tents and we have classes that are going on outside, which has been really, really great. Who knows if that'll continue?
Sure.
I'll just add our students and faculty have been really compliant. I mean, we have seen very effective in the classroom in terms of health and safety. And so I think that this opportunity to transition away will be helpful, but it has worked. Everything we put in place, I think, has really reduced any transmission in the classroom environment.
And what you've described, I think, gives rise to a certain sensibility, you know, on the part of individuals. And that's something, I think it's going to be a long time before we stop wearing masks.
Yeah. That's so interesting. There is one question that came in and I'll ask it. I'm not exactly clear. So maybe you guys will have more to say, but the question is, what is a teach out plan?
A teach out plan means in case, let's use the University of Iowa. If they have a program that they have determined is not able to continue to be supported, or in the case of a smaller college, the college is going to not be in business anymore. A teach out plan means basically any student that's currently enrolled in a program at a large university or on a campus that's closing, there are relationships with other campuses that will accept those students. And those students will be able to finish their program of study.
Sure. So probably more relevant for a lot of students right now that are at maybe struggling colleges or programs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess I'm wondering if you all can share with me and with everybody listening if you have just one or two like real big takeaways or lessons that you feel like that this pandemic has taught you about higher education or students or your universities specifically.
Jonathan, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I guess Vanessa, I would have two main takeaways. The first one is, I think, and I would have said this before the pandemic, I think that the culture of an organization, of a college or university, is going to be ever more important to the success of that institution going forward. The ability to make decisions quickly, wisely, with information, to really be that sort of classically nimble institution. And my first takeaway from this pandemic is how I guess I should have expected this. The Cornell culture, the ability to make decisions quickly, is sort of woven into this place. I mean, in mid-March, our faculty started to have conversations about this fall, and in a matter of just over a week, I mean, in higher ed, we usually say, if you give us a decade, we can do great things. I mean, we're not known for being quick. In a matter of just over a week, our faculty added 2 blocks in the next summer, so a 10-block year, and started to get to work on the curriculum and how it would work block by block. So I think the cultural piece for me, a major takeaway is how important culture will be in a healthy decision-making culture. And the second takeaway I have is how compliant, as Kevin mentioned, I mean, how compliant our students are. in particular, faculty and staff for sure, but our faculty and staff feel more at risk with COVID-19 because we're older. Our students might feel like they're impervious to this. I'm amazed at how disciplined our students have been about following all of the COVID-19 protocols that we've set in place.
I would echo those comments and just add that it's been very apparent to me and our campus leaders that what's really critical is communication. And we can't communicate out enough, I don't think. And I know, Vanessa, you can appreciate that. A campus our size, there's lots of different perspectives, opinions. We need to be transparent. That's important as well. You alluded to the fact that different universities and colleges were doing different things, and we continually get asked, okay, why aren't we doing what the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill is doing? Or what about Indiana University? So to be able to communicate out, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here are our data, and I think being very data driven in our decision making and making sure that the campus community understands the data and how we're utilizing that and provide it to them. You know, with access to all the information, we have to be able to address the decisions we're making and justify them. So that's been something we've really had to focus on daily.
Okay.
And it's satisfying, isn't it?
Well, unless people don't like the decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Can't make everyone happy.
right. I would echo to some extent what both Kevin and Jonathan said about the unexpected flexibility of our campuses and the communities inside those campuses with regard to how they've been able to pivot to a very different reality. And elements of that reality, I think, will continue. When we look at some broader issues, particularly in different states around the country, it is obvious that the choice to go to college, whether it's at a private or a big university or a public comprehensive like Northern, the choice to do that is getting more and more pragmatic. You know, is this worth the investment of both money and time? And what, again, we're beginning to pick up on is students that are making choices about, do I go ahead and move forward in higher education? They want to know how it's going to pay off for them. And that means much more pointed ways in which, back to Kevin's notion, communication. What does majoring in French bring you as you move into employment and your world, whatever that is, post-graduation? And that's not going to go away. If anything, it's going to accelerate.
Sure. Yeah, well, and we have a couple of questions here of the same vein. It says, what would you say to a person who is looking to teach at the collegiate level or who was looking before COVID hit? And what is the outlook for faculty going forward? Yeah, can you start with that?
Well, the outlook will, I think, be challenging in some areas, some disciplines, for example. Maybe with fewer students going to college, there may be fewer opportunities for instructors in general, but at certain areas, certainly there will be some growth and some need, and certainly more diversity in our faculty makeup is going to be critical based on certainly the demographics that Sally outlined. So I think there are some opportunities, certainly the flexibility to teach online courses will allow you to maybe gain some opportunities as well.
Are there programs that are going to be increasing in demand, do you think? If a faculty member was looking forward at what programs will be increasing, like obviously you mentioned the skill of online teaching will be valuable. What do you think about the specific fields of study?
Certainly, I think STEM areas will continue to grow. I've joked only in a way with our Dean of Public Health, Edith Parker, that, and you know, I would expect a lot more interest in the public health field going forward based on the pandemic. But certainly in the areas of computer science and technology, that's going to be very important going forward as well.
Particularly with regard to security in the cyber world, as is being revealed with everything that's going on in post-secondary ed online.
Yeah, President Brand, what about within the field of liberal arts there in your expertise?
Well, that's the big tension. I mean, we're definitely seeing growth in our STEM areas, and we're psychology outside, it's sort of a STEM area, but not entirely. Exercise science. The hard part is, for us, the most profound or powerful educational experience a student can have is one that really touches multiple disciplines across the sciences, social sciences, natural sciences, and the humanities. Mm-hmm. And so the struggle that schools will have, and when I say struggle, it's one of these conversations that a college or university campus has to have, is how do you ensure your adherence, your commitment to that breadth and the depth that you really, every student optimally needs. And so that's where the communication and conversations on campus are so important. If you look at the data, it shows nationwide that largely the humanities are the area where enrollment is seeing, again, nationwide, the greatest decline. And so schools that know that the humanities are essential to that sort of, as a foundation to lifelong learning and to lifelong democratic citizenship, the real conversation is, how do we ensure that for our students in a way that also that they know they need. That's the other part of it. I mean, Sally mentioned the value proposition. We know what our students need. We all do. But if they don't know it, if they don't know it or value it, then we have a whole different challenge we have to work through.
And Jonathan, do you? I mean, what you've just described is the traditional way in which we've thought about, let's just say, liberal arts. But why not stretch that out into a different model? Because the new students that are coming in, they're going to question the need for the humanities. And we know that from the data. It's exactly what's going on. So if you begin to give them what they need, but then don't cut them off when they go out into the work world and they're still engaged and able to pick up the humanities as individuals begin to understand how important those are.
Right. Well, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And part of it is, of course, I mean, we often like to think that we're just farmers. I mean, we're just planting seeds for our students, and then over the course of their lives, we hope that they germinate and sprout and become these beautiful flowers or whatever plant you choose. And so I completely agree. And that's the work that we have to do in higher ed in sort of helping students. I mean, at the end of the day, we want students to figure out who they are and then give them the skills to sort of live within that.
Well, thank you all so much. I think we've reached the end of our time, but I'm so thankful for you to be here, participate. I'm sure many are grateful for your leadership and the thought that you're putting into all of this. So thanks again for participating. Sorry again for the late start, and thanks for everybody who joined in.